tonight, but as part of the Surrender hashtag S20 Shalom sessions, I'm helping us have a conversation about In My Blood It Runs, the movie down there. And to do that, I've got two fantastic friends and guests, Safina and Brooke. Ladies, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
This is Brooke.
This is Safina. So this is Safina Stewart, and I'm Brooke Prentis. I'm an Aboriginal Christian leader, descendant of the Waka Waka peoples, which is one of the nations in the lands that we now collectively refer to as Queensland. It's wonderful to be here with my sister Safina to be able to have this conversation, and we thank you, Braden, for your help as well.
And I'm Safina Stewart, and I'm Mabiyog and Woodsti woman. And you are in my studio, in my art studio. This is the first ever live interview inside my studio, but I feel at home. And my kids are asleep, which is a miracle. And all is settled and well, and the delay is now not happening. And I'm pleased to be here. And I think just to contribute thoughts and feelings and reflections from the movie Stimulus, which has been incredible. But it's really good to be doing that with someone, because we watch the movie separately, but to hear thoughts from another Indigenous woman, just another person, is actually quite, it's a supportive technique, especially when we're dealing with such big and hard topics like what was brought up in the movie.
Yeah. So we're going to jump in, and friends tuning in, hopefully you will feel like, especially if you've seen the movie, you'll be able to ask questions to sort of prompt this conversation. We're going to be here for a little while. So just the easiest way to do that is in the comment section. And then you can, we can hopefully post them up here, or we can drop them in the comments, and Brooke and Safina will reflect on that. So spoiler warning, we're going to assume you've seen the movie, and we're going to talk about the movie, some of the context the movie's in, and really will be led by your questions. And hopefully if you all Surrender ticket holders were sent a link to watch it for free, which I think is remarkable, and hopefully you've had the chance to do that. But of course, I think the conversation can be broader than just Surrender ticket holders. Anyone joining in and want to be part of the conversation, you're very welcome.
And Braden, I think Safina's just going to acknowledge country.
Wonderful.
That as well.
Wonderful.
Friends, tonight, wherever you are, on whoever's country you are on, then let's just stick our feet firmly on the ground and just find our place of center. And as we do that, we are coming and speaking to you from the lands of the Bunurong people, one of the 5 Kulin nations here in this state now called Victoria, in this country now called Australia. And it's been my honour and privilege to be living here safely and so cared for here on Bunurong country. And so I pay my respect to their traditional elders from the past, who I never met, their present, who I do get to live in relationship with, and their future, who I'm helping connect and encourage. And so for all the people groups that we are representing from all the different places that we are sitting on tonight, I want to ask Creator Spirit's blessing over all of them and protection over all of them in the name of Jesus. And I also want to thank my Creator for my elders and for my ancestors on my mother and my father's side, who have given great love and care and raised me up, and also continue to raise up my children and the generations that will follow. So it's with remembering our past and those who are in the past, remembering where we are and whose lands that we are on, that we come with honour and respect tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. I think as people are tuning in, and there's 15, 20 people tuning in at the moment, friends, get comfortable, because if it's anything like yesterday's conversation, we're about to hear some profound truth and reflections, and I hope you can stay with us. Ladies, how about, and you were sharing a little bit as I was dealing with the technical glitches, and that was all my fault, about some first reactions from both of you after you've watched the film today.
Just before we get there,
Yeah,
Brayden,
before
if I
we
could
get
just say a couple of things. First is I'm very grateful that I actually get my Safina Stewart made Anzac Bicky. I will enjoy it for you and for all the viewers, as well as with my cup of tea. But also just want to thank World Vision, who are a hosting partner of Surrender, and an impact partner of In My Blood It Runs, and that's how we've been able to see this film through World Vision's relationship with Surrender. And really just want to encourage people to engage further, and we'll say this at the end as well, through, I think there's a link in the email that we were sent, but on worldvision.com.au/truth. And organisations can sign up to actually host their own screening of In My Blood It Runs. And so I do just want to thank World Vision for being an impact partner with this film, to enable all of us through the relationship with Surrender to be able to see this documentary and film, and then to be able to discuss this together. And so, as myself, as a campaigner and advocate for justice, I thank World Vision for their role in advocating for First Nations peoples in these lands now called Australia, and encourage all to get involved with this film, but with our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander justice in general. So yeah, that's just a few opening comments. And I think, and just as a way to continue my acknowledgement of country here on the lands of the Bunurong people, and to bring it into relationship with In My Blood It Runs, I just want to pay my respects to the Aranda peoples on whose country the film was made, and Duan, the 10-year-old boy featured in the film as an Aranda boy and growing into a young man. And to say, as it starts in the movie, memory, history, in my blood it runs. And as I sit here beside my sister Safina, in our blood it runs. And so, yeah, looking forward to sharing all of this tonight. So in terms of first thoughts about the film, there's some of my first thoughts, but Safina?
I don't even know where to start. Like, to be honest, I was angry. It's a brilliant film, brilliant documentary, so brilliant in so many different ways. And it's because it's so well put together that it's so real, because for us, it's real already, because, I kind of had to sit in protection mode to not go into re-trauma type crazy head, and to be viewing for purpose rather than viewing to be overcome. So it took a lot for me to be willing to be a part of this, because the discomfort with the pain is an everyday thing for Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people. And so to choose to enter the ring or the arena, we have to mean it, and we have to be ready to hold it. So I found it disturbing, but not unfamiliar, not new. It was revealing, but not to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So For me, I was mad because it was rehashing the rehashed. It was raising what has been raised for generation upon generation of the injustices of colonization over our people. But I was mad because it hurts our children, the innocent ones. It hurts our children. And I have 3. I have 3 beautiful Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children who I am trying to raise to, like what Nana Carroll said, to live in 2 worlds and to be able to cope with the systems. But because I'm trying to raise 3 children to cope with the systems, it means that I have to make some devastating choices about where I live and how far away I will be from what should just rightfully be mine, what should rightfully be theirs. Safety, connection, connection to country, connection to ancestry. But I have had to make a devastating choice and be willing to be far away in order to give them an opportunity to have an opportunity. This is the tearing of the Aboriginal family. So I was mad and undone all at the same time, and fearful. The fear that, what was the mum's name? Nancy. Megan. The fear that Megan carried and portrayed and explained, I could feel my the depth of my diaphragm starting to quiver. My breath got tight, and I started breathing like an anxious one. As she described, I don't know what's going to happen next. I really don't know what's going to happen to my boy now. He's made too many X's on his report card at school, and the authority for my boy's life, for the welfare of his life, is now in the hands of someone other than myself. And that's really scary. And yeah, very, very confronting. I feel like I'm waffling, but I'm not waffling for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think for me, like, in a way, you get lost for words. And those that know me know I don't often get lost for words. But it's incredible. I think the story that it tells, we're living this each and every day. And this isn't just happening in Alice Springs. This is happening in the suburbs of Brisbane and the suburbs of Sydney and the suburbs of Melbourne, as well as in the remote community context and our regional centres. Aboriginal communities exist right across these lands now called Australia. And, there's so many layers to In My Blood It Runs, this documentary. And those that also know me know that I talk about how Aboriginal people listen deeply. And we don't just listen with our ears, we listen with our eyes and our minds and our hearts and our whole beings. And so I'd love people, if they've watched this movie once, to go away and watch it again, because I'm sure that there's little details that they might have not picked up. And so this isn't just about the education system. And so if you've come away thinking it's just about the education system, you've missed the whole section. Because for me, this told the story of how all of the systems are embedded in this injustice and how that injustice affects, it's an Aboriginal injustice. So it's the prison, the police officers, the education, the hospitals, the welfare, what the mum talks about as welfare. I just want people to understand she's not actually talking about Centrelink, although that is the other element of the system that's connected to this, but she's actually talking about what we now know as many of the state departments as child safety or child protection. And when you go to where Dwan says he's been in the back of a paddy wagon as a 10, 11-year-old boy 4 times, these systems are not about the safety of our children or the protection of our Aboriginal children. They're systems that are at their core just built on centuries of injustice. And I think the other thing for me is there is a frustration that Australia keeps having these wake up moments, and I've written about this before. And one of those that I wrote about, and I sent a link, Braden, is, and it's kind of the background of the movie. So that's one of the other things to realize when you see the boy in the spit hood chained to the restrained to the chair. His name is Dylan Voller, and what happened to him was the subject of the Four Corners report in 2016, and I've sent a couple of links through to Braden, which he'll share. And so I wrote about, after I watched the Four Corners documentary, which we've been living as Aboriginal people for so long, and we knew what was happening to our children in the youth detention centres and in our school systems. And I thought that it felt like Australia woke up, but I prayed that Australia would stay awake. And what happened is what I thought would happen, but what I prayed against was that Australia fell back to sleep. And then it woke up again, and then it falls asleep. So another one of our wake-up moments has been the Adam Goodes documentary, The Australian Dream. But what was happening to him on the football field was back in 2015. So we've been living that as Aboriginal peoples, but the non-Indigenous population wakes up and then they go to sleep. And so I will pray again. Safina and I sit here as an Aboriginal Christian leader and an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Christian leader as well. So prayer is essential to what we do, and we will continue to pray that Australia stays awake, that in my blood it runs. You've heard the heart-wrenching real story of a 10-year-old boy, his mum, his nans, his great-nanas, and their everyday struggle just to survive in these lands now called Australia. And so I pray so much over this whole situation, and I call other non-Indigenous Christians to stay awake, pray to stay awake, and then to do something, to take action for justice.
They're profound first thoughts. Please don't take my turning to this side as anything other than checking the tech. I've got 3 computers going to make sure this works. So please know that. And I've been dropping some of those links in the comment section of the source video. So friends, if you want to follow up anything the ladies are saying, just scroll through and there's a couple of links. The World Vision one's there, the Staying Awake Thoughts, and a link to the Four Corners report. They're down there so far. And Brooke, if there's other things you want that you sent me that you want in, just say post that one as well when we get to it.
Great. I think one of those other subtleties that I just wanted to make sure that I said was, so much of it is about Dwan and his Nana Carol wanting to make sure that he learnt the Aranda language. And if you don't notice in the background, there's all the NAIDOC Week posters. And that year it was Our Languages Matter. And so this is one of the ways to listen with your eyes. And I wonder how many people actually saw that in the background was the NAIDOC Week theme poster for Our Languages Matter. And so I encourage people to go and look for that poster as they're watching the movie as well, and to see, another element of what the filmmakers and the film are bringing to life for us, like what's around us. It's in the school principal's office, and so it's quite an incredible background. Yeah.
I just want to say how beautiful Jawan is, and how strong, magnificent, intelligent, gifted, and anointed, dare I say anointed, he is. I felt like an auntie kind of feeling when I watched him using his hands to minister healing to his nana and his auntie and other kids as well as other adults. And his posture was so dignified. And he knew that he was meant to be doing this very special thing. There was absolutely no doubt in his spirit that he was who he was made to be, and that the power and blessing and gifting that had been passed on from his grandfather to be a healer, there was no doubt in his mind, nor any of his family's mind or community's mind. The doubt of his worth, value, intelligence, respectability, and capacity to bring value to the broader of Western society was only ever questioned by those who were non-Indigenous. And I saw very caring and well-meaning non-Indigenous people within the film, but I was also exposed to a lot of the ignorance, arrogance, what do you call it when someone looks down on you because they think that they're bigger and better and smarter? All of that. To talk down to a child, it's wrong. And then to use one's power to talk down to a child or to the parent or to the grandmother is just so cutting, incredibly disempowering. But he was so beautiful, and his strength came from when he was within community, and his strength was amplified, like off the charts, when he was able to return to his homeland with his nana and be with community, with the multi-generations, speaking language, but actually on the land that held the bodies and spirits and stories of his ancestors, his people. I resonated with a quote. They were at the supermarket and Nana Carol was getting a bit frustrated at Jawan for pushing the trolley too fast through the car park. And there was a quote by Nana Carol. She said something like, when we've got the car, when we've got the supplies, when we've got the petrol, when we've got the time, then maybe we might be able to go home. And then it cuts to the next scene where you can see them driving home, and you can see his spirit come alive because he's anticipating, he's excited about. You can see the electricity within his body alerting him to his return. And she was teaching him in the car, you need to tell them I have come home. Tell the spirits of the ancestors, tell Creator, tell the land, tell all of creation, I have come home, I have returned. It was just magnificent. I saw it again when I saw that vibrance and that lighting up of his spirit come when he was able to speak language in the Aboriginal school. And there was a beautiful comparison between the classroom with the auntie who was teaching language, and then moved to the class where there was English being taught, and they had to return to the national curriculum, as it were. And all of a sudden there was shutdown. You could see their heads hang, you could see their motivation and involvement just fly out the window. It wasn't there. The meaning of being connected to one's people and one's place, to know one's belonging and to know one's purpose, is so important to the survival to our people. If you take that away, if you dismantle our dignity, but also our very, very amazing connection to this place, to our place, then you will continue to kill us. It actually has the effect of killing our spirit. I liked that this film pointed it out in very visual, observant ways of just the difference between what it's like to be taught language by an auntie compared to what it's like to be in a mainstream, modern, Western, white curriculum, national curriculum school classroom. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think when we think about what's being taught, you know, I have a lot of conversations with people that are like, oh, well, our children are being taught the true history of Australia. And we've still got a long, long way to go with that. I mean, you see what Duan has to put up with being taught the white history of Australia. And then when that non-Indigenous lady is reading that dreaming story and how dismissive she is of our culture, but yet the Aboriginal kids, it means something for them. They could be teaching the class, but yet they're seen as, you know, hand over the book and let them teach the class. And it broke my heart again when one of the Aboriginal children said, hey, the spirit's real, eh?
And she didn't say anything.
And she's like, oh, I don't know what this spirit thing is or what this dreaming thing is. And you have that on one hand, and then you have on the other hand still the rhetoric of Captain Cook discovering Australia, and you know, all of those things that go hand in hand. And you know, we acknowledge that this year is 250 years of Cook coming into Sydney on around the 29th of April. And so, but the lack of truth telling as a nation into that true story, that, you know, apparently there's $50 million spent in celebrating Cook coming to Australia. And the tour of the Endeavour is supposed to go around the whole of Australia. Cook never sailed the whole of Australia. And so this is where I also want non-Indigenous people to wake up and to challenge the government systems when they continue to perpetuate untruths, and that the true history is still not being taught in our schools today. And so we need parents to ask for that to be done, and to really challenge you know, how our Aboriginal children are viewed in these systems, to recognise that they can't have language lessons for more than 30 minutes. And, you know, we want to see children flourish and live life to its fullest, especially our precious children. And, you know, Duan and many of his classmates who are Aboriginal, they're leaders. He's a leader. And it broke my heart again when on the phone call to his nana, the school called him a little outlaw. Stop labeling our children and care about them and look at them as precious children, and to see their beautiful gifts and their leadership even at such a young age.
Now, people are tuning in, and thanks to those that are helping at the other end, making sure that people can access this video. It is a confronting film to watch, because, and the truth does that to us. And you've shared your vulnerability and your emotional responses. I wonder how we might channel and I really appreciated, Brooke, what you were saying about that there are so many little elements in this, even with the final scene with some backburning going on, and how that speaks to our recent bushfire crisis as well, and like even that like troubled me. So I wondered how we might speak to until someone else asks a question. I'm going to ask a question. How and the staying awake thing is so relevant as a second person, a white Australian. How might we be alert to these issues, and what? Because hearing the story, you have to honor it. You have to act. I think that's the So what might be the first thing on any of these, what feel like big issues, that we might begin to act? Is it simply lobbying, advocating? Is it something physical and tangible? Does that make sense? And again, it feels so disingenuous to ask you to tell us what we should do because we have inflicted all that pain. But maybe in the spirit of seeking wisdom, I'm asking, rather than shifting responsibility. Hopefully it sounds how I intend it rather than the other way.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And the way you answer it is, I've got the words of Paul Keating in his 1992 Redfern speech. And if people haven't listened to that, you can watch it on YouTube or you can find the transcript, Paul Keating's 1992 Redfern speech. And he says something to the effect of, imagine if this had happened to you. And so when we think about our precious children, if you are non-Indigenous, no matter what cultural background, what would you do if this was your child and your children? And lead that to drive your action. Because we know what we do. We take the protests to the streets. And so many non-Indigenous people often criticize us when we protest in the streets, which are non-violent protests, but we're trying to get our voice out there. We're trying to help non-Indigenous Australians to stay awake. We're trying to educate you. We're trying to show that people power. When we're only 3% of the population, we can't make the change on our own. We've tried for 2 centuries, and I wish desperately we could. And I pray that as 3% of the population, we will be considered an important part of all of the systems and be looked to first. But we've still got a long way to go in this country. But we will continue to lead this country to break these injustices, to understand that these injustices are breaking UN declarations on the rights of the child. And so we know how this Australian government looks at the UN rights of the child, as well as the UN rights of Indigenous peoples. So to understand that, go and participate as a very first action, participate with the website that we shared before, worldvision.com.au/truth. They want you to fill in some surveys so that they can collect some of the data and thoughts so that they can advocate for systemic change. So we want to get behind World Vision with that, which is World Vision are getting behind Aboriginal people's actions and our Aboriginal led organizations, not just doing it on their own. Common Grace, I know I'm the CEO of Common Grace, but I've put out so many actions there. Go back and have a look at our National Reconciliation Week materials from last year. We called it Reconciliation as Truth and Action. And over the 7 days, we had an action that you could take. Some days it was a simple action. Other days it took a bit more work. But to write, one of them was about the Aboriginal deaths in custody, and to write letters to your state corrections officers. And go and look at the footage of Dylan Voller from when he was an 11-year-old boy, stripped naked in his cell and held down by 3 male corrections officers. This is what's happening in our state-run systems every day. And in the Northern Territory, when it's 100% of young people in the youth detention centres are Aboriginal. And when you look at the layers of In My Blood It Runs, these boys and girls are being put in the back of paddy wagons for simply being in the city at nighttime. Like, really? Do they have to be put in a paddy wagon? Like, let's raise up non-Indigenous peoples and start writing letters and start taking action, ringing up your local member. Often as Aboriginal people, when we ring up our local members of parliament, we can't get past the person who takes the call, because the minute you say you're Aboriginal, they're like, oh, well, the local member's very busy and I'll pass on what you're saying. But often it doesn't get passed on. And so to take that time to actually write the letters and to take action, you know, this one should immediately spring to mind. And I think I'll probably write my own letter, which I might share, but don't wait for us to share it. Just, you know, that this is wrong. So do something. Write to your state education ministers. You know, write about teaching Aboriginal languages, but not just for your non-Indigenous kids in the capital city who want to learn an Aboriginal language. This is the lifeblood for our Aboriginal peoples, to learn their language, to, you know, and I'm going off actions now, but one thing, the sense of wanting to go back to their homelands. I'm sure many of those teachers and the principals in those schools that Dewan is in think his homeland is the town camp in Alice Springs. His homeland is there in Sandybore, where they have to save the money to be able to go back to country. And you talked about the bushfires, Braden, and the beautiful thing that crackles in the background of the movie is the campfire, and how the campfire is central to that storytelling, to that knowledge passing. And this film shows beautifully how our elders are still teaching us as the next generations. And it's a privilege for us to be able to go on country to do that. And it shouldn't be a privilege. It should just be what is required and natural.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are there any more questions from people? People asking questions?
We are inviting questions in the comments. It's really simple. Even if you just want to get, like, we're posting, you know, you say something nice, we'll post it on the screen. And I think, I mean, I could speak on a lot of people, I think, about how we deal with the guilt and the shame that as a Anglo-Australian we see there. And you do see it in cringeworthy moments, but also there's some systemic things there that people have to acknowledge the consequence, but you don't get to claim to be the victim. Like, you don't get to say, well, poor me. You have to, in a sense, acknowledge that and take responsibility. And that's a hurdle that we've seen for years and years. People balk at when they're like, well, that makes me feel sad, and so I'm powerless, and yet that totally dishonors the actual implication and the actual hurt that's going on. So friends, get over that and ask questions, you know, because these two ladies are so generous. And I think, Safina, you acknowledged it right off the bat, the hurt that comes when acknowledging this as a mother, but as any Indigenous person. I can't imagine, obviously, but like, to acknowledge it, to enter the ring, I think you said. Yeah, I want to honor that and acknowledge that. See, here's a good example. Steve Malkinton, you drop a comment, we'll flash it up. You know, it's that simple. But put a question mark at the end of it. Or else we're just going to go off and eat Anzac cookies, you know? Well,
I finished mine. It's gone.
It's gone.
It was great. It was delicious.
Excellent. Good. How's the cup of tea? The cup of tea still going well?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I do want to say that it's not our responsibility to have to help you through your white guilt.
Absolutely.
I have been cornered on hundreds of occasions from well-meaning people who, for some reason, think that I'm more approachable than other Aboriginal people or other Torres Strait Islander people. Must be because of the smile. They don't see the daggers underneath. but I'm not actually responsible for holding your pain, your guilt. I'm holding enough already. So I'm speaking on behalf of our mob. I think I'm holding enough already, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
And for you to assume that you can even approach me and stick me in a corner me and say, I have this big issue with my guilt and I don't know what to do about it, poor me. Wouldn't that be probably another misuse of power, perhaps.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better to actually go and face your questions and your demons, and then approach me in a way that would make me feel safe as an Indigenous person? I'm not talking about me personally, you know that. I'm talking about we as Indigenous people. Maybe if you guys did your business, we could actually meet together and do our mutual business together a lot more effectively, without you wearing me out, without you sending me into sorrow and conflict and confusion again, where I would have to serve you to raise you up. Isn't that just the same as the domestic violence, the sexual violence, the discrimination that has been repeated over years, where I don't actually have to deal with that stuff because you've actually done your stuff? Hope I'm making sense here. But if there was genuine, real, heartfelt, long-lasting, sorrowful, repentant apology, then I'd appreciate that conversation, but not for taking. In order for there to be a giving and a raising up, because we know that reconciliation has a whole heap of important health steps involved in it, in what we see Jesus' example of reconciliation is. So hold back with the imposing of the white guilt epidemic. As you confront and as you come in contact with the discomfort and the remorse, get the support that you need. Find the resources that you need to become wised up and educated. Get your history, make it personal. But when you come and interact with we, the Indigenous people, come with an honouring that the pain has been very long and old for us. And it's not new. It's not newly shocking like it might be for some. It's actually a very ancient one, and we've carried it from generation to generation, even if we haven't had words to yet express it. Even if only now is our beginnings of voicing things and things maybe being heard. But as you go, you must go to our God about it. You must go to our Creator and Saviour and Healer about it, and weep and mourn and cry in our Creator's presence, because He will minister to the wounds of your heart, the histories of your family, or of yourself, or just the histories in general. He will minister to that. But don't look to the victim to be the healer of the perpetrator. Yeah.
We have a question from Amanda Merritt. It doesn't all fit on the screen, but I'm going to read it to you. Hi, Safina and Brooke, and then she waves. That's nice. As a non-Indigenous person, how can I learn more about these systemic injustices? Sometimes it's hard to understand the complexities, particularly when she says, I'm trying to get my head around government policies. Mm-hmm. So how do we do more than just, yeah, that looks bad, that sounds bad?
I think it's about like all of these things that I know about. I mean, obviously there's lived experience as an Aboriginal person, and particularly as an Aboriginal Christian leader and walking alongside community. Like I've been with my young people to court, and so you go and sit in a court for a day and you'll see the injustice in front of your eyes between what happens to Aboriginal people and what happens to non-Indigenous people. Like there's immense injustice, and particularly when you see, you know, a 17-year-old, as was the case in Queensland, 17-year-olds used to be sent to adult prison, and so I would see 17-year-old Aboriginal child after 17-year-old Aboriginal child going into the adult system. But I don't know all of these things that I know about the systemic injustices just because I'm Aboriginal. Like, I've had to do my research as well. And so if you do take this to heart, it does take your time and your resources to do, to read, to spend time with community. You know, like, I wished out of this film that principal, instead of getting Nana Carol and Mum Megan into the office, go up to the homeland with them, sit on country with them, and see how these children are learning from their elders. You know, so to understand, like, when you just read a little bit, you understand that the first prisons in Australia were built to house Aboriginal people. That's really easy to find out. They weren't built to house the convicts. They were built to house Aboriginal people who had done nothing wrong, but it was just part of the colonial system to put us in chains, our people in chains, and to lock them away. I mean, you just have to look at the history of the lands now called Tasmania to see that the Aboriginal people were moved off the mainland of Tasmania and put on the islands in prisons effectively. And so, you know, the stolen land, like, it goes back to Dewan being taught that history book about Captain Cook. You know, that is one of these foundational systemic injustices, that the land was stolen. And, you know, look at Dr. Peter Adams' work about stolen land. On Common Grace, we've put together a whole bunch of those resources. You've got theological resources, church resources, just paper resources. You know, you look at the systemic injustice of us not having a voice, an Aboriginal voice in or to Parliament. So lots of people want to talk about the Uluru Statement from the heart, but this wasn't just a call in 2017 by 300 Aboriginal people. We've been calling for this since the federal parliament first opened and beyond that. When Jimmy Clements stood on the steps of the Parliament House opening in Canberra, and he demanded a seat in Parliament for Aboriginal people, you know, and this William Cooper in 1937 petitioning for an Aboriginal seat in Parliament. And then today we're still asking for, you know, it's become this voice to Parliament, but people need to understand. And when you walk with Aboriginal community, we had the National Congress. It was a representative body of elected Aboriginal people, but the government's defunded it. And, you know, another current one is, many people were talking about what happened with the sports grants recently in the federal parliament. The same thing happened with Aboriginal money. $560 million dished out in the 6 months leading up to the election, given to non-Indigenous organisations, including Wesfarmers, Fortescue Metals, including some of the Christian arms of the churches who do social work. But where's the Aboriginal employment in the social arms of the churches? Anglicare was one of the ones that was named as receiving this money, which is meant for Indigenous disadvantage, and it's called the Indigenous Advancement Strategy. But you've got $560 million in 6 months going to non-Indigenous organisations meant to benefit our peoples. And, you know, you've got Nana Carol trying to raise money just to fill the car with petrol to go to the homeland. And so you start to see, and once you start to see, you can't turn away from it. So I think it just has to be a practice of that this matters. It's a foundational injustice in Australia, and to do your own work and to continue to walk alongside Aboriginal people. And you'll see all of those things. I hope that's an answer, Amanda. There was a lot in there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but there was also a lot of like thumbs and hearts, and as you were speaking. And if this video is going to get posted on the Surrender page in the coming days, and because all those documents, all those aunties and uncles you mentioned there, Brooke, are worth like a thorough reading and you know, sitting with and wrestling with. So I hope that not just Amanda, but everyone who's paying attention can actually tap into some of that. Now, there's been a few questions come through, and we don't want to be here till 3 a.m., but some of them are really profound. So, and I'm also
We'll try to
never
have
go-
shorter answers too.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to cut you off. However, we do want to get to some of these. And so Joe Shan has asked a few questions, but she's got your mobile number. There's a few good ones there. Matt DiLorenzo, we're going to get to yours in a moment. Scott McGeehan, I think let's jump here. And again, you can't see all of it, but let me read it to you. There is an expression of gratitude for your ministry, wisdom, and leadership. Would really appreciate comments about dealing with our own white guilt. Any thoughts on how we can support Indigenous leadership, rights, and truth-telling in our society without falling into the dominant savior rescuing complex that shapes so much of dominant culture efforts?
Well, that's a nice big question. Thanks,
Yeah, Scott
Scotty.
asked good questions. Yeah.
I just want to bring the word humility up, and in Chronicles, I don't know, first or second, maybe second, First Chronicles, if my people who are called by my name,
Second Chronicles 7:14.
If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, turn from their wicked ways,
seek my face,
then I will hear from heaven,
and I will
heal their land. But that humility is very, very significant. And I just want to remind everyone, wherever you are placed in your context, whether it's your job, your work, your ministry, your family, whatever connections you have with your Indigenous community surrounding you, it's incredibly beautiful to be connected in humility with each other. Humility doesn't assume a lot. It accepts much, and it hears and honors. So that's my simple answer to Scott's really deep and big question. I think we need to start with a spirit of humility. And in terms of where to support Indigenous leadership, I just want to do a plug for Grasstree and ask that people would continue to support in prayer, but also financial assistance and practical support, volunteering, support our Grasstree gathering, which brings together so many Indigenous Christian leaders from around the nation. You all know about it. Please tell people about it. Tell people who have influence. Tell people who have finance. Tell people who you know would be significant partners with us and for us. And also be telling your Indigenous community members about Grasstree so that they can connect in with us as well, maybe come along, but also so that they can be encouraged by those of us who have found Jesus to be our Saviour and our hope.
Fantastic.
And I think also for those that are Christian, to realize the injustices that are happening to Aboriginal people in the churches, the fact that racism is still rife in the church. And so non-Indigenous people to raise this as a conversation starter. But when you hear the blatant racism that you will hear, or even the unconscious racism, to call it out, that's the work that non-Indigenous people need to be doing, because, and it's hard work for you to do because it's your own friends and family and people that you respect, that you've got to call it out on. But, the impact of racism, which includes this systemic injustice, is just breaking our peoples. It's killing our peoples. And, we're trying to do everything that we can so that it doesn't. But, look around. How many Aboriginal churches do you see? And if there is an Aboriginal church, is it an Aboriginal Christian leading it? Often it's not. If it's an Aboriginal school, is it an Aboriginal principal? Who's leading your Aboriginal programs in your Christian organizations? And challenging those systems as well, because as Aboriginal Christian leaders, we've been challenging them, but the cost is great, and many of us have suffered great cost for speaking up. as have our elders. And, we carry those stories, we remember, but we still, because of that Christian foundation, Safina talked about humility. Many people think that we haven't forgiven. We have to forgive each and every day, often like every second of every hour of every day. But the amount of people that have said to me, oh, you just need to forgive, you're missing the point. I have forgiven. Yeah, and then the next one is stop being angry. Why are you so angry?
And you guys need to move on. Where? I belong here.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, I'd love to see, I don't know what the filmmakers have done, but Nana Carroll should be speaking at assembly at that school.
Yeah.
So, and at every school as well, like she's, but the Aranda language is so important. And, she's a linguist, like, so I don't know her story. So there's some of the questions that I carry. And, I do want to shout out to Amanda and thank her for the work that she has done in looking at policies and walking alongside our people. And so I thank her for her question before as well. And I think, I'll leave it there. Joe Shan had a really good suggestion about something.
Oh yeah, we're going to get to that.
Yeah,
okay.
We're getting back to that, but this one's now come up twice, and I think we've touched on it a bit. So, as women of faith, but also recognizing that Christianity is a system that has had a mixed history in this country. How do we have conversations respectfully, recognizing, and this links to one of Joe's earlier questions about, hang on, let me find it. What is the role of Christianity as a system, and how can we, as people of faith, as Christians, initiate change in our own patch as well as in wider society? So this one, okay, and then we're going to get to schools.
Yeah.
And then I think we might find a way of tying all this together, because or else we're going to need to refuel coffee cups and stuff.
Yeah. Well, a short answer to that, in a roundabout way, is like still me getting asked, how can I be Aboriginal and Christian? That question needs to stop, because if people are asking that, they're not understanding so much, and so build relationship with us first. So I now throw back the question and go, how can you be white and Christian? Did we lose you, Braden?
No. I just found that I could put you on the big screen.
Oh,
and
okay.
that feels better. Yeah.
Okay.
Except that we're looking at ourselves even bigger now.
Everyone's looking at you, big screen, Safina. It's okay.
Okay.
And so, how can you be white and Christian, and to look at Christianity as a culture as well, so to understand what lenses we're looking through. Like we haven't been put through the theological colleges either. Like I can't still get into many theological colleges to be able to teach about things as an Aboriginal person, let alone our elders getting in. And so, we've got the NATES program, which Safina and I are students of, and I'm on the board of as well, which is an Indigenous Theological Institute at the Masters and PhD level. So in the theological colleges, they haven't let us lead as Aboriginal peoples. And so, why isn't the question, isn't it amazing that most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are Christian? And why is that? And to look at that, and part of the answer is going back to Duan, or one of his classmates, that said the Spirit's real, eh? There's so much that we can teach and that hasn't been recorded, because our history has been recorded by particularly white male anthropologists, and so people need to understand.
Oh, we've lost them. They'll be back in a moment, I think. At the moment, it's just me, a white dude, talking about this film, and that is probably not acceptable. But we will let Safina and Brooke rejoin. The stream continues. There's a chance they'll be able to click a link Luckily, we've got significant tech support coming up, which is myself. But here's something to think about. People who ask Indigenous people to get over it or learn to forgive are unwilling to repent. Thanks, Pinky B. And here's one for the home groups. Why do we think anti-racism work and preaching is not happening as a priority in our churches? If you think about that, while I try and reconnect with our guests, that would make this Q&A with Brooke and Safina actually include Brooke and Safina. Friends, if you're tuning in, there's a big gap just there where Safina Stewart and Brooke Prentis have been sharing generously and profoundly for the last hour or so, based on the viewing of In My Blood It Runs. Now, if you head to that website, inmyblooditruns.com, down the bottom there, the distributors acknowledge that it is a tricky time to get out and watch the movie. It is in limited screenings around the country, but they're also exploring ways to make it available. So I would suggest that you check it out. There's also a Facebook page connected to the movie. Just type in Facebook, In My Blood It Runs, and you will find all the details about that. And look at that. Here they are.
And so that's the whole history of Christianity in these lands now called Australia.
Thank you. Fantastic. Look.
Sorry, we dropped out there.
Not a problem at all. I
seamlessly
covered.
Oh, great.
But no, I didn't. No, I just acknowledged that this isn't what people tuned in for. There was a question that so Matt DiLorenzo started here, and I apologize, Matt. You asked this a little while ago, and we're just getting. But I hope you hung around. Thanks for so much for the opportunity to watch this. As someone who works in a school in student wellbeing, what can I be doing to ensure that my school community is engaging positively in practice and in the broader conversation? So I think, and then there's been some comments and suggestions going back, both having a screening and then appropriately replaying this conversation. But I think there's, if I can add a B there, how do we have this conversation with children as well, and that they then don't have to relearn? And I guess probably I'm thinking non-Indigenous children, so that they then don't have to relearn this when they become woke teenagers or young adults or whatever.
Well, I think part of it starts with the Aboriginal children and Torres Strait Islander children in your school, like bringing them together in a group and bringing in Indigenous role models to help them to connect with their culture. And if you are a non-Indigenous person who's on the journey with us and done that work, you can also help them to be proud of their culture. And then that filters to the non-Indigenous children to understand to look up to these Aboriginal children instead of seeing them as the students that are getting the E's in the class and the disruptive ones. Let them teach about their culture, but they might not know about their culture. So how can you help them to connect with their culture? And then, I've suggested to a lot of schools too, have an elders morning tea that brings in their parents and grandparents, instead of only bringing in the parents and grandparents when a child has done something wrong. Bring them together for a morning tea. And the amount of schools that I've said that to and haven't seen the importance of that connection. But then, because those elders are incredible, like many of them are traditional owners and know their culture. And so they could then be teaching the non-Indigenous children. But it's also not just bringing us in for free all the time, that you actually have to pay for that to respect you know, many of our elders are not employed. Many of our people are unemployed. And so, but you've seen how many of our people struggle to get through the Western education system. So how else can you support these incredible leaders and to give them that respect and honor? And that as a non-Indigenous person, you can do that and help to lead the way.
I have a teaching background, and so also as an artist, I get to go into schools, kindergartens, various places of learning. Sometimes as a novelty, but other times to actually be asked some of these key questions of how to actually bring embedded change. There are places that I enjoy working in and others that are such a strain. One of the differences between the two is very much the intention of the staff, the directors and the leaders who are actually bringing in Indigenous voice. So if I were to be an Indigenous voice, a consultant or a community member coming in, I want to know what their intention is. Are they only... Is it surface? Is it simplistic? Is a date coming up and that's it? It's all over after that date? Or are they actually intending and wanting very much to commit to a sustained, deep relationship that will involve local community for all time yet to come? Not just in this term of my appointment as principal, but actually forever after me. We shall forever be making changes within this school forever, and for both Indigenous and non-Indigenous students who will come here to have the impact of it kept safe and sustained for a long commitment of time. So sometimes we need to look at curriculum and how curriculum has been developed in the school. We do know that the national frameworks have very much enforced that teachers are to include Indigenous content and perspectives. The problem that I'm always coming against is teachers and it's the educators feeling unconfident or not qualified to be able to teach Indigenous content. Truth is, non-Indigenous people shouldn't be the first ones teaching Indigenous content. It should be the Indigenous community ourselves. So again, getting into contact with your local community and finding the people who are able to speak on behalf of, or if there's a skill, talent and gift that can be brought, that is willing to be brought into that school community or that educational facility, that be connected to. But it's got to be through genuine relationship, always through genuine relationship, where power is put down at the door. We put our ammunition down before we walk into the meeting room. It's not about who's holding more power. It's actually about for the sake of the children. I live here in Boonwurrung country, and one of the there's two amazing mandates given by Creator. One is to look after creation. This is in very simplistic form, but the other is to look after the children. We have to remember why it is that we're doing what we're doing. If it's for ourselves, it will fall on its face. If it is for the generations to come, then it will have the blessing of our Creator. I absolutely loved how in the film, again, there was a comparison between the intentions of the grandmothers and the aunties and the uncles to make sure that their children were kept safe and well and survived. The swell of the motivation was so deep. When I looked at, in comparison, the teachers that were screened and the principals that were screened, I didn't see that they had a deep, I haven't got the word, but it's as though investment, there you go.
Yeah.
There wasn't the same investment for future in the classroom teachers as what I could recognise as in the older generations surrounding Joanne, as well as his little sister and little brothers and the rest of the children. If we have teachers, if we have educators, principals, school leaders, school committees, those in department making big decisions with the same heart as those old aunties, uncles, and nanas and grandmothers, where the investment is for forever, where the investment is an absolute essential, not just a preferred choice for the current moment, then we might have strategies that are far more deeper than, oh, please raise the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag, both at the front of your school. It might actually go deeper as to the reasons why. If you're going to raise those flags, then I'm going to assume that that means that you agree that sovereignty was never ceded. So know what you're going to believe, know what you're going to put up and surround yourself with in those educational systems, but mean it. Because if long-lasting change is going to happen, we're going to need you to mean it.
And I think just to add to that, it's, I mean, if you've journeyed with Aboriginal people at all, you'll know that we often say that one of the answers is about relationship, but that is deep relationship. And, you know, I talked at the beginning of this about some of the how to listen with your whole being to this In My Blood It Runs. And one of the other things that I saw in the letter to Duan's mum, it says, dear parent carer. Like, so there's not even the relationship of her name, and these won't be big schools that he's a part of. And so to get to learn the families, and I know many people who've said, oh, well, whether it's in children's ministry or youth group or at a school, oh, well, we don't understand the kinship structure or who the Aboriginal children stay with. And you saw the rich beauty of his kinship structures across all of those mothers and nanas and great nanas, and they're all growing him up. You know, so to actually build that deep relationship is really important. And if people are looking at their schools, I've developed a schools program, so I'm very happy for people to get in touch with me, and I can help you to navigate that. So you can email me at brooke@commongrace.org.au, and I'd love to see that happen. And one of the beautiful things that I had at my primary school, where my mum's been a teacher aide for over 35 years, we held a beautiful NAIDOC week, but it's gone more than NAIDOC week. It's about bringing the Aboriginal students together. And for me, as have been a community member, to even sit down with the head of curriculum of the school and look at the program, and some teachers who are really, one teacher in particular who was really passionate about, because the national curriculum is called Embedding Indigenous Perspectives. And so how is a non-Indigenous teacher supposed to embed an Indigenous perspective? And so that's one of the other layers of this systemic injustice. And so, you know, as Safina said, find your relationships in your own community. There will be Aboriginal people there, but some of those of us that are leaders in this space come and talk to us and have us involved. And yeah, we can do amazing things through relationship together.
Yeah, wow. I'm gonna wrap up. I'm gonna do some housekeeping, and then I'm gonna let you both have any final thoughts, comments. So I'll do all the info, then I'll throw to you guys, and then we'll retire what has been a most profound conversation and a privilege to listen to. We do want to thank World Vision again for supporting Surrender and In My Blood It Runs. So thank you for them. We want to thank Surrender and remind people that over at the Surrender Facebook page, these Shalom sessions continue. And tomorrow, Helen's song, All Creation Groans, is being posted. And with permission to share in your church gatherings, be they live streamed or digital or whatever, profound song. And thank you for permission, So check it out. I think it'll be a YouTube clip, so it'll be fairly easy to share however your churches are gathering. That'll be on the Surrender Facebook page tomorrow. And more and more content's going to be uploaded at surrender.org.au with workshops and those sort of things. So as these ladies wrap up with any final reflections, I want to again thank you both publicly on behalf of everyone who's tuned in for your truth and your story sharing and your vulnerability and your patience and grace. And as you're speaking, people can drop their thanks in the comments and we'll flash them on the screen, and then we'll all say goodnight. So, ladies, over to you to wrap this up.
I just want to say that I love my sister, and I feel very privileged to be journeying alongside and having relationship with a very inspirational and powerful, wise woman. And I want to acknowledge all of those who have gone before us, especially Auntie Jean, who we just love and appreciate so much. And yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And if there's one thing that I want to leave you with, it's courage and brave agitation. Thank you for coming and listening and being a part of tonight, because it actually shows that you have an interest in the deeper concerns of what our mob is having to live through and go through. And there's a sense of pilgrimage together as we go. And I've been a part of Surrender for a long time, maybe since I was 22. Yeah, which is a little while ago now. But if it weren't for Surrender, I wouldn't actually know how to travel as an Indigenous woman who believes in Jesus. There has been many times when I have really wanted to exit this scene, and if it wasn't for people asking good, hard, beautiful questions and dealing with the struggle, chewing through the tough bits with and alongside me, I don't know if I would be around here. But in terms of journeying alongside Aboriginal people and taking up the cause for justice, please take it up. We need you, and we need you. We need you to learn, and we need you to want to grow, and we want for you to connect, but carefully, knowing that there is a fragility, knowing that there is a lot of complexity, knowing that even it's messy, but to not have to shame us for that complexity, but to actually see us through the eyes of Jesus, his loved ones. We are his chosen ones, and we are worth something so significant that he would lay down his life for us. And it's not hard for us to know that there is a greater power looking after us, because the survival of our people proves that our God, our Creator, has actually been caring for us despite all the travesties and the tragedies and the horrific systematic or non-systematic crimes committed against us. So again, I don't know if that makes sense. It's like after 10 at night, but I feel very grateful to have been here with all of you and with Brooke and Brandon. So Brandon's my husband. Sorry, Braden.
That's all right. I'll forgive you.
And yeah, I very much echo what my dear sister Safina has said. It's been a privilege to be able to sit beside you to have this conversation. This doesn't happen every day for us, and so the way that it strengthens us to sit next to each other. I want to pay my respects to Auntie Jean Phillips, who's been an incredible influence on my life, to Uncle Ray Minicon, Uncle Reverend Graham Paulson, Uncle Neville Naden, Auntie Reverend Denise Champion, Auntie Rosemary Rigney and Uncle Clyde Rigney, Auntie Alex Gator. And this is the problem when you start naming people, because there are many, many others. But as we have this conversation, as education shines a light on #LearnOurTruth, I do just want to acknowledge the incredible Aboriginal leaders that I came into contact when I was at high school, and that was Auntie Faye Gundy, who's also an amazing Aboriginal Christian woman, also Auntie Lynn Chapman, and then later on Auntie Jackie Huggins when I went to university, and Uncle Sam Watson. And Uncle Sam passed away at the end of last year, but I thank him for all that he taught me and encouraged me to take up the fight for justice for our peoples. And when I first saw him on the TV screens when I was in primary school and saw this incredible Aboriginal leader who was fighting for justice and raising the voice of Aboriginal people and the injustices facing our peoples. And so I honour him and his family and grieve his passing as we try and take up the mantle as the next generations to continue to fight for justice. And so I do want people to continue to have the conversation. Please have a conversation. Find any way to have the conversation. Use the hashtag #LearnOurTruth. I'm pretty sure I've got that right. #LearnOurTruth. And at the end of In My Blood It Runs, there's a powerful line, and it's stop killing Aboriginal peoples. Please stop killing our peoples. Help us to see life in all its fullness. Make that a reality in Safina and my lifetimes. And we need each other, as Safina said, to do this. And those of you that know me know that I say, I dream, I pray for an Australia built on truth, justice, love, and hope. I thank Surrender for helping me to keep that dream alive. I thank this movie, In My Blood It Runs, that helps me to keep praying that we can together build an Australia built on truth, justice, love, and hope. And I acknowledge and pray for my incredible Aboriginal Christian leaders that minister to our communities each and every day with little to no resources from the churches. We pray for those resources to come in abundance, but we thank you for the work that you do with our communities because of the leadership role that you have, but because of the call Jesus has put on our lives. And may God continue to give you strength, courage, and the resources and the love and compassion to do that each and every day.
And on that note, this ends our marathon live stream. Thank you for tuning in. If you've joined us late, go right back. The whole video is worth listening to. Thanks again to Brooke and Safina, and good night, everybody.
And thank you, Braden. Thank you for helping us through this. It's been amazing to have you journey with us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Braden.